Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one, we are going to have a look at another collaboration beer. So this one is half Latvian on the home side, half French on the away side. I think this is the first time we've had such a combination here on the channel, but both of the breweries involved in this one have featured on the channel before, albeit the Latvian brewery a good few more times than the French brewery. Now, when it comes to the Latvian brewery, if people were to ask me about them, I would say they are one of the kind of premier breweries of Latvia, one of the first breweries that really started to make Latvia known as a beer destination, and they're probably best known for their different kinds of New England hazy, whatever you want to call them, IPAs, but also for their fruity, juicy, smoothie, Nordic, whatever we're going to call them, sour beers. When it comes to the French brewery, these guys have really been making a name for themselves in recent times, and I think most of the beers that I've tried from them have been on the bigger, darker and more malty side, but from what I gather, this brewery is very solid all round. So it's a brewery I do want to explore a little bit more, but I need to try a few different styles from them going forward, I would say. But generally speaking, the French craft beer scene is very strong, but the beer is just a little bit difficult to get. But yeah, the beer that we're going to have a look at today is a style that I do quite enjoy. It's one that you don't come across all that often these days, in all honesty, and it's a sub-style that I haven't seen in a very long time, and it's my first time trying this style actually from either brewery, so I think it should be a really interesting one to take a look at. So needless to say, I'm very curious to see how this one's going to turn out. Hopefully it's another good beer. Hopefully it makes for an interesting review, and as always, I hope that you guys watching enjoy my take on this one as well. So yeah, for this review then, for the home side of things, we are going to head to Latvia. We are going to go to the northeast of Riga, the capital city, to a little place called Eimuri in the Adazi region, and that means that we're going to have a look at another beer from the wonderful Ārpus Brewing Company. So this particular beer is simply called Imperial Cascadian Dark Ale. It comes in at 8% ABV. I think from the name you know what style this one is. So it's a kind of black IPA, although to be specific it is the Cascadian Dark Ale. And this one is brewed in collaboration with Brasserie Popihn, who come from a little place called Vaumont to the south of Paris down in France. So yeah, two very good breweries involved in this one. Like I said, I've got a bit more experience with Arpus than I do with Popihn, but yeah, I've had very good beers from both breweries actually, and you know, you don't come across Imperial or Cascadian Dark Ales all that often, let alone an Imperial Cascadian Dark. So this one should be really cool to review actually, and this is one of Ārpus Brewing's latest releases here in Hong Kong at the time of filming, which is June 2025. But yeah, let's crack on with this one then and see what we have. Really cool to return to Popihn after what feels like a little while, and with Arpus fairly regularly, right enough. But let's crack on with this beer then and see what it's going to have in store for us. So, as always with my reviews then, I'll tell you a little bit about both breweries involved here before we taste the beer. If you do want to get straight to the tasting though, just fast forward. All the usual links can be found in the video description below. That's the brewery websites, the link to my other reviews that I've done both from Arpus and from Popihn, and we will hopefully be able to add more to both of those lists at some point in the fairly near future. But there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The support that you give is massively appreciated, and remember, you can go into the channel homepage and search for beer using the geography tagging system. So just go in there, use the little search bar, put in your hometown, state, county, province, whatever you like. If I've reviewed beers from the area that you search for, they will pop up. Failing that though, you can check out the playlist of beers from different countries. You'll find this one in the Latvian playlist and the French playlist, since it is dual nationality. Both of those are being added to whenever I get the opportunity, but not as often as I would like, of course. But do make sure that you check out the playlist of beers from other countries as well, because there are some very interesting things on the channel these days, even if I do say so myself. And both Latvia and France have some very good craft beers, so make sure you learn a little bit about some of their breweries. But yeah, let's go on to my brewery notes then. And I'll tell you a wee bit about Ārpus Brewing Company first, since they are the home brewery in this case. So yeah, Ārpus Brewing Company, as I've mentioned to you already, are from Latvia in the Baltics, and the company was founded back in 2017 by two home brewers. This is Jirs Tihomirovs and Vladimir Berezins. So they started off as a gypsy brewery, but they were based primarily in Riga at this time, and in the first year of production they brewed at 4 different breweries around the country, and they say that this helped them really understand about about using different brewing equipment. But later on in 2019, they received funding from the Latvian Investment and Development Agency and also the EU Agricultural Fund for Rural Development. And through these grants, if you like, they invested about 200,000 euros in their own brewery in Eimuri in the Adazi region, which is just to the northeast of Riga. But the new brewery helped them increase their output quite dramatically, and they apparently export about 90% of what they're producing. And this is not an uncommon model in the Baltic countries because, you know, they're very small in terms of population, but they can produce things very, very well and meet their domestic needs quite easily. So yeah, you get very good beer from the Baltics for very cheap when in terms of the Western European perspective. So always happy to try things from there, of course. But the brewery are operating a 2,000 litre brew kit, and they've got several 2,000 and 4,000 litre fermentation vessels, and they've been gradually upgrading the brewery infrastructure over the last few years and expanding their fermentation capacity. But the name Arpus is taken from a Latvian word, and it translates into English as kind of like thinking outside of the box. So that is why the Arpus motif is Arpus, inside the box. But yeah, they like to think outside of the box, which is quite interesting. But as of June 2025, when I'm filming this review for you, these guys have produced over 140 different kinds of beer according to Untappd. And like I said to you, they've made their name when it comes to they've become best known for the different kinds of New England hazy, whatever you want to call them, IPAs. Also for their fruity smoothie sours, which are very good. And they do some really nice imperial stouts these days. But I have seen them producing a few more random things in recent times as well. So yeah, I need to go to Latvia and actually just try some more different Latvian breweries, but Arpus are very well known across Europe these days. But that is everything I can really tell you about Ārpus Brewing Company for the moment. If you want to learn more about these guys, you can check out the brewery website, you can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and you can of course check out the Untappd page to learn a little bit more about all the different beers that these guys have done. So yeah, let's go on to the away side of things then, and we will head southwest to France. So yeah, Brasserie Popihn. So Brasserie Popihn are based in Vaumont, which is to the southeast of Paris, close to Troyes and Auxerre in the Bourgogne-Franche-Comté region. I will apologise for any bad French pronunciations in this video, but this area is also known as Lyon, and there are quite a number of breweries in this region these days apparently. But Brasserie Popihn was founded by Arnaud Popihn, whom of course it takes its name from, back in 2015, and it's based in an old barn that underwent extensive renovations, and the brewery can be found on Arnaud's parents' farm, and a number of the ingredients that they use in their beers are actually grown on site, and the barley, wheat and oats that they use in their beers are mostly organic. But they began full tilt production in 2017, and they very quickly made a name for themselves in Paris due to Arnaud's connections in the beer scene there. And over the course of 2018, they brewed around 100,000 litres, and they began to export their beers to different countries in Europe. As I've told you many a time, French craft beer is very, very good, but it just is quite difficult to find. I think, a lot of the breweries are still very small, but they are starting to get their beer out there a little bit more, which I'm very happy about. But they've continued to expand their brewing capacity over the last few years, and apparently they're also working on producing their own wine and cider at the moment. They've got 2 hectares of 67, which contains 67 different grapevines, and they've also planted an orchard on site as well, and they've got other fruit that they're growing there too, which will be used in some beers later on. And they've got a barrel aging program too, which sounds like it could become very, very interesting. But Brasserie Popihn are quite a well-rounded brewery. They do lots of different styles. Like I said earlier, most of the beers that I've tried from this brewery have been at the darker end of the spectrum, so hopefully I can try a few of their IPAs and things at some point in the future. But as of June 2025, when I'm filming this review for you, these guys have produced 435 different kinds of beer according to Untappd. But yeah, that is everything I can really tell you about Brasserie Popihn for the moment. If you want to learn more about these guys, you can check out the brewery website, you can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to see what the latest goings on are, and you can check out the Untappd page too to learn a little bit more about all of the different beers that these guys have done. But that is everything I can really tell you about the breweries involved in this one. So that's the end of our history section in this video. Let's go on and have a little look at the beer itself. So, like I mentioned to you earlier, this one comes in at 8% ABV. It's simply called Imperial Cascadian Dark Ale. This was the most interesting one, I felt, of the well, we've had 2 batches of Arpus quite recently, right enough, but this one just kind of caught my eye because it's a style that I haven't tried from either Arpus or Popihn, and it's not often these days that you see beers being called Imperial Cascadian Dark Ales. So yeah, obviously the main difference I think between a black IPA and a Cascadian Dark Ale is that the Cascadian Dark Ale obviously focuses primarily on the use of the Cascade hop, but also the flavour profile is a little bit more balanced, whereas the black IPA is a little bit more kind of hoppy and bitter. But yeah, I don't think I've ever tried one that's been a Cascadian Dark Ale that's been called Imperial either, so that's another thing that makes this beer particularly interesting. But it says on the side here, a collaboration between Latvia's Ārpus Brewing Co and France's Brasserie Popihn. This Imperial Cascadian Dark Ale is where deep roasted malt character meets the bold intensity of hops, pouring midnight black with a lacing tan head. This beer is a paradox in a glass, rich and dark like a stout, yet packed with the resinous bitterness and citrusy vibrance of a West Coast IPA. Aromas of roasted coffee, bitter chocolate and pine resin intertwine with bright notes of grapefruit, orange zest and subtle floral undertones. Sounds pretty good, right? But yeah, 8% ABV this one. Let's get it out and into the glass. I've been looking forward to this beer for quite some time actually. So yeah, let's do this. So, here we are. Yeah. To say that looks very, very nice. So, I think that's maybe about 80% of the beer out and into the glass. But yeah, it looks very, very nice, I have to say. So, as you can see, this beer is poured with about a 2/3, 3/4 finger of a light kind of beige fawn coloured head there. You can see the you can see the smaller bubbles on the surface of the liquid there, and as you go up toward the top of the head, it does of course get a little bit more soapy, but you can see that this beer is a lovely dark sort of ebony rosewood colour. So yeah, remember the colour of your beer depends on the type of malts that you use for the most part. That goes a long way to determining your EBC rating, but the length of your wort boil can also play a role. Any barrel aging that you do or any adjuncts that you put into the beer can also affect that as well, but you don't often have to care about that when it comes to different kinds of IPAs, I guess, because this beer does fit into the IPA category more than anything else. But yeah, it's not, quite often with IPAs you don't have to care about adjuncts and things, and when it comes to black beers as well, there's very few adjuncts that can actually change the colour of the beer. But if we shine the light through this one, it does have a little bit of that kind of Coca-Cola Pepsi coloured edge to it. There's not too much in the way of visible carbonation with this one. 1 or 2 bubbles sticking toward the side of the glass and a few little ones going up toward the bottom of the head there. But it looks pretty nice. The head has of course just faded away to be a kind of thinner, more foamy layer, and then you've got a nice ring around the edge of the glass there. But overall it looks pretty nice, and it's pretty much in keeping with what you would expect from a Cascadian Dark Ale or a black IPA. Now for me there are probably 2 different types of black IPA. There are the kind of New England ones which have quite a little bit of wheat and oat in the malt base as well as the barley malt, and of course they're more bready in their flavour profile, whereas you've got the more old school kind of West Coasty ones which rely primarily on barley malt in the malt base. So yeah, I actually quite like the West Coasty black IPAs more than the kind of more New Englandy ones, to be honest. But yeah, I'm quite curious to see how this one is going to be, because to an extent you can see it's actually quite clear when you shine the light through it, but yeah, it doesn't, yeah, it maybe has just a very slight haze to it as well. So yeah, I'm curious to see how that turns out, but not too much in the way of visible carbonation. As I said, I don't think we really need to say too much more about the appearance of this one. So let's have a wee look at the aroma then and just see what we get out of this one. I'm very, very curious, like I said. Ooh, right. This one, I have to say, does smell very, very nice. Yeah, this actually takes me back to what black IPAs used to be when I first encountered them back in 2015, 2016, something like that. This is really nice. I love it when you get beers like this that just give you that wee bit of nostalgia, of course. But yeah, where do we start with this one then? It's giving you everything you would want. You've got that nice kind of toastiness in the backbone there, you've got a bit of breadiness and sweetness in the malt base, good little bit of green component, and you've also got that oily, you've also got that nice kind of oily, fruity character coming out of this one. So yeah, the way that all of that pieces together, I think, is really, really nice in this beer. Usually with black IPAs like this, they would use Cascade, bit of Chinook, sometimes Simcoe. Simcoe is always an interesting hop in these because, you know, obviously it gives you passion fruit in a regular IPA, but when you put it into a black malt base, it behaves quite differently and gives you a lot of like figs and berries and stuff like that. So yeah, a few interesting things in this style, of course. I mean, Amarillo was another one that could behave really interestingly in these beers too. But yeah, this one smells great. So let's just break that down and describe it for you a wee bit more in depth. So the backbone of this beer, you've got a little bit of a roasty, toasty bread crust in there, but it's not overly like well fired. It's not a kind of black crust, if you like. It's actually more like a sweet, toasty, kind of rye bready bread crust. There's little hints of wood in there. There's little hints of cracker and stuff like that. Yeah, so the way that that goes together is really nice. On top of that though, you do get like a sweet kind of oily rye bread. There's a little bit of a slightly drier wholemeal brown bread in there as well. There's maybe a very, very slight like nuttiness in there too, but again, that's very, very minimal. But above that, you're starting to get all of the kind of brown sugary notes out of this one. So for me, it's quite there's quite a little bit of like a toasty brown sugar in the base, but you have got, there's a little bit of McVitie's digestive biscuit in there too, right enough. But on top of all of that, you have a more oily and kind of sweet caramelly note coming out of this one. So yeah, the way that that goes together, the way that the malty side of this one goes together, I think, is really nice and really quite old school, very nostalgic for me, I would say. These are all things that you would have expected from the black IPA back in the day, as we call it. So yeah, the malty side of this one, or the yeasty side of this one, sorry, at the back of the nose is quite interesting too. For me, yeasty side of this beer is quite yeah, it's quite, it's got like a nice kind of oily yeah, it has got a little bit of a more kind of, how would we say, it's got like, it has got a bit of rye bready character to it, but you've also got a wee bit of a more kind of wholemeal brown bready sort of note there, and a wee bit of the bread crust again. The yeasty notes are just a little bit drier, in honesty. There's a bit more crackery and woody character to them than the actual malt base, but they're not overly different. I think we can safely say that. But yeah, the way that this goes together, I think, is nice in terms of its malty and yeasty backbone. It's exactly what you'd want. So yeah, good stuff. Let's move on to the hoppy side of things then with this one. So as I've said in many reviews before, when it comes to IPAs, there are three different types of hoppings you can use. You've got early addition hopping, which takes place usually within the first hour or so of your wort boil. That gives you a deep, dank character and it's responsible for the vast majority of your bitterness. You've got late addition hopping, which takes place within the last half hour or so of your wort boil. A little bit of bitterness, mainly flavour and aroma, and it's going to give you a very bright green component, and you can say the same about dry hopping, of course, which takes place after the wort boil, although it gives you no bitterness. But yeah, this one, it's a little bit difficult to tell what they've done with it, because it does have a wee bit of deep dankness to it, but it doesn't come across as being overly dank in the aroma. So I think we'll get more out of that in terms of the flavour, but there is a wee bit of earthiness in there. There is a little bit of piney resin, some floral notes as well, slightly spicy floral note. And then at the front of the nose, you've got a bit more of a kind of grassy zestiness coming out of it. So yeah, that's quite interesting for sure. But I think we will get more bitterness out of this one than the aroma is leading me to believe at the moment. We'll just need to see. But yeah, I think that's everything we need to say about the green component. Fruity side of the beer, for me, there's a little bit of grapefruit to this one, which makes me think, yeah, obviously Cascade, maybe a little bit of Chinook. The piney resin in this one's making me think a bit of Chinook as well. So yeah, a little bit of Chinook in there potentially. But there are elements of, I'm getting a bit of that kind of oily, peary, sultana-y type note that Cascade will give you when you put it in a black malt base. There's also a wee touch of fig to this one, I think, and I can see what they mean about it being slightly orangey as well. I'm picking up on some of those more citrusy, orangey type notes as well. So yeah, the way that this beer goes together, I think, is really very, very nice. Properly old school West Coast black IPA, this one. I think we can say that. And at 8% ABV, I think it's going to be pretty awesome. This was a style that I quite often used to argue was better as an Imperial than it was as a single. I think you needed that bit of sweetness just to balance it more. But yeah, as I always say, take a little bit of time to enjoy the aroma of your beer before you get stuck into it. But I think it is about time that we taste this one and see what it's all about. So yeah, this one is the Imperial Cascadian Dark Ale, coming in at 8% ABV from Arpus in Latvia and Popihn in France. So let's have a taste of this. Slàinte, skål, cheers, I Svetika, if I remember correctly in Latvian, and Santé. Let's try. Yeah, that's a really nice beer. I will say that straight away. Yeah, this guy, very clean actually as well. That's my first impression of it. It's a very clean and actually quite light and drinkable beer, this one. But it really just gives you into the aftertaste. You get that punch of bitterness that you want. A really, yeah, very, very solid offering from Arpus in my opinion, and Popihn of course, so big thumbs up to both. So yeah, this is a more old school West Coasty type black IPA, but it does have the balance, the slightly more malty presence that you would expect of a Cascadian dark. So yeah, very good stuff. But you've got everything you want: the roastiness, the breadiness, the sweetness, the hoppy bitterness, and also that kind of oily fruit. So very well done, very well done. Let's just break it down then and describe it for you more in depth. We'll start on the middle third of the palate, as we very often do. Yeah. So, the backbone of this beer, you can feel the base of the beer is a little bit of a roasty toasty. It has got a little bit of that well-fired bread crust to it. I would not be surprised if it's carafa that's been used in this, because it's not overly dry, and it does have a little bit of that kind of smoother dryness to it. So I wouldn't be surprised if it's some variety of carafa from Weimar in Germany that's been used as the base malt here. So yeah, that slightly toasty bread, that very slightly well-fired bread crust is the backbone of this beer. As you move further forward in that middle third of your palate, you get a little bit of woodiness out of it. Then above that, you get a kind of smattering of Jacob's cream cracker. But the next layer up is the kind of oily and more dense rye bready character. So yeah, the rye bready notes in this one, I think, are really quite oily and really quite sweet, but they're not. They come out more into the aftertaste. You'll find that when you take this beer in, it's actually very light. but then the flavour kind of densifies, or intensifies, I think is the correct word, the further into the aftertaste that you go. So yeah, you've got that oily rye bready character in there. Then above that, you get more of a lighter wholemeal brown bready character. And within those, there's just a very slight nuttiness and woodiness that comes out more into the aftertaste. And then above that, you get a more toasty, above that you get a more toasty kind of brown sugary base. So yeah, toasty caramel there, and then above that you've got an oily circle, which is a kind of you've got that oily circle where the sweet caramel comes out of this one. So yeah, the toasty caramel, then the oily sweet caramel, that kind of sits in the middle of the palate, but it's kind of in the very dead centre. It's got that slightly dense boozy character to it, then a sweeter caramel around the edge, and a wee bit of a more more kind of toasty, biscuity sort of thing out of it. I think that's fair to say. Toasty caramel in the base, bit of McVitie's digestive biscuit further in, sweet caramel, then the more dense boozy side of things. I think that kind of covers the middle third of your palate in this beer. It's really nicely done. It's not the most oily of malt bases I've had from a black IPA, right enough, but I think it works in this one. So yeah. Let's move on to the back third of your palate then. Remember that generally speaking, sweeter flavours come out further forward on the palate, more dry and bitter flavours come out further back, and you also get very similar flavour profiles between the middle third of your palate and the back third of your palate, just at different intensities. But yeah, the border region between middle and back third of your palate, you get that nice little bit of bready build up in there. You've got the kind of rye bready character in the base, the brown, and then the brown bready character, kind of the wholemeal brown bready character further on top. But yeah, the base of that back third of your palate is a slightly drier and even more toastier version of the bread crust we were talking about earlier. You've got the Jacob's cream cracker sitting on top of that. Then there's the rye bready layer, which is a little bit lighter and taller and more airy, just a wee bit drier of course. Then yeah, you've got a more wholemeal brown bready note sitting on top of that. And then yeah, you can feel some of the toasty brown sugary characters, just the more toasty brown sugary characters just creeping over the top there. A wee bit of the oily ones go above that as well. So the way that all of that pieces together is quite nice. But then above everything else on that back third of the palate, you've got the yeasty side of the beer coming out. So let's just focus on those yeasty flavours for a moment. So yeah, the yeasty side of the beer then. At its core, it's like a very sweet, very, very oily German rye bread, that's for sure. Then as you move out from that core of yeastiness, it kind of just gets a little bit lighter and sort of more grainy. And then yeah, it has a bit of a kind of toasty, it has a little bit of a more toasty, bread crusty character to it as well. So yeah, the yeasty character is a little bit drier into the aftertaste also, so you can feel that on the very back third of your palate there, but definitely back third of your palate you can feel the flavours taller. Then as you move further forward into the middle third of your tongue, it just kind of condenses down or compresses down and squashes together that little bit more. So yeah, the way that all of that pieces together is nice. I really like the yeasty and kind of malty side of this beer. It's not too bitter, it's actually quite well balanced in a sense. But let's focus on the hoppy side of things then, green component first. So back corners of the palate, you've got that nice little bit of you've got that nice little bit of earthiness in there. So that's there, and as you move further forward, the earthiness does spread forward a wee bit, but you start to feel the kind of pine resin underneath, and as you move further forward from that, you've got some nice floral aromaticity in there, and it's a little bit more kind of spicy the further forward that you go. So I like that about it. But round the front curve of the tongue, It's just a little bit lighter and more grassy. I would say it's got a little touch of zestiness coming out of it as well. So yeah, green Cabot on this one I think balances out quite well. The little bit of pine resin and the floral aromatic spice balances really nicely with the roasty black malts for sure. So yeah, I like this one. The front third of your palate in this beer then is where you're getting all the fruity side of things. So let's look at that. The border region between front third and middle third of your palate, you get that nice little bit of kind of bready character that builds up there. The rye bread in the base, the wholemeal brown bread above that, and then the base of the front third of your palate is of course the bread crust, the cracker, the rye bread, and then the wholemeal brown bread, and you get a wee bit of the toastier side of the brown sugar just creeping forward. Then you've got that nice oily bubble where the juicy fruity esters roll their way out of the beer. So let's look at those. So yeah, the fruity side of things in this one is kind of, if you know this sort of style, it's kind of what you would expect. At the back of that oily bubble, there's a little bit of grapefruit in there. Yeah, there's a little bit of grapefruit in there. And as you move further forward, it's got a little bit of a more, yeah, there's the grapefruit in there. You've got a little bit more of a kind of figgy sort of note to it as well. So yeah, there's the kind of figgy sort of thing, and then you've got a bit of that sort of oily pear sultana type note that you'll get from the Cascade hop. I do think there's a bit of Chinook in here, in honesty. I think there's a bit of that because the hop, the kind of piney resin and the strength of the grapefruit are just making me think that. Could be a wee bit of Columbus as well, actually, in honesty. But yeah, as you move further forward, you get that little bit of kind of figgy, slightly blackcurranty note. And yeah, as you go into the front half of that front third of your palate, it certainly gives you a wee bit of a kind of orangey note, which could be, you know, it could be a little bit of mosaic, which would explain the earthiness in the beer, or it could be a little bit of Amarillo, but I'm leaning more toward mosaic in honesty, because the orangey notes just aren't quite oily enough to be Amarillo. It's always fun to play guess the hops for these beers, of course, but it's quite difficult these days because of the sheer number of varieties. But yeah, more orangey the further forward on that fruity part of the palate that you go. But all in all, a really, really nicely done black IPA, this one. Ridiculously drinkable for an 8%er, in honesty. But yeah, I think both breweries have done a really nice job of this. So gets a big thumbs up from me. Let's round off the review then with a wee quick look at the mouthfeel. So yeah, I would say that this beer is quite yeah, I would say that this beer is quite, it's kind of mid-bodied. It's actually very clean and drinkable, as I've mentioned earlier. So I'd say it's mid-bodied, it's right in the middle of the spectrum. Slightly oily, but also quite silky and clean, I think is a good way to describe the mouthfeel. The IBU in this one, I want to say this is maybe about 70 or so IBUs, because you're getting bitterness from the roasty backbone, but also, yeah, you're getting bitterness from the roasty backbone, but also from the hoppy side of this one. So 70, maybe 80 IBUs out of the beer. The malt base is kind of roasty underneath, smoother in the middle, and kind of more sweet and brown sugary on top. And then yeah, you've got a really nice oily fruity character out of this one, which is more citrusy rather than anything else, but you get a wee bit of a more kind of berry character in the middle of it. But yeah, this is quite a nostalgic beer for me in terms of its flavour profile. It's what black IPAs were like back in the, you know, in 2015, 2016 when I first became acquainted with this style. But yeah, as you'd expect from both of the breweries involved in this one, it's pretty damn nicely done. So yeah, I think we can leave it at that for this one. It's been nice to have something different from both of these breweries, and I have been quite impressed with it. So I hope they continue to be a bit experimental with the different styles that they're doing, because I think they've done a nice job of it. But let's leave it at that for this one. This one was simply called Imperial Cascadian Dark Ale, and it was from Arpus in Eimuri, Adazi, to the northeast of Riga in Latvia, in collaboration with Brasserie Popihn from Vaumont in the Lyon region to the southeast of Paris in France. So once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comments section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Arpus and Popihn as well, and we will no doubt return to these guys again at some point in the fairly near future. But until then, Sláinte, skål, cheers, check out my social media, check out the brewery social media, and I'll see you in another review very, very shortly. I Švétaka and Santé.